I'm Michelle.
And I'm Katherine.
And we're here at the Healthy Hurried Human Podcast,
where we talk about keeping pace in a world that never slows down. Well, welcome back. I am really looking forward to today's podcast because I really feel like this is the heart and soul of why we decided to start podcasting in the first place. And you're going to introduce the wheel, what I really think is a practice and a habit that once you start doing this, it's a game changer.
Yeah, Katherine, this is why, and you mentioned it in our last episode, that we had a plan in doing each episode because we've been building a foundation, and the foundation is here to support today's conversation. And we're going to be diving in. It's a lot of information talking about the main thing that we do at Foxygen is we focus on the wheel. We also call this KFIs, key functional indicators. But to give a little bit of a review, there are areas in our life. So this came from years of being a therapist, one-on-one personal therapist, where the marriage and family, individuals, children, things like that. And over those years, finding that everybody had, their stories were unique, but the things that they struggled with were always the same key areas. And you actually were so pivotal in helping me create this into an organized form. And this is where we came up with the wheel. But these areas tend to be the things that weigh us down. They become our stressors. They are kind of like the cement brick tied to our ankles, trying to stay above water. These are those things that they slow our performance and our productivity. Mm-hmm. And we focus a lot at Foxygen on the workplace, because when we go to work, we don't get to just cut loose those things that are weighing us down and those stressors. Right. We take them into work with us.
That's right.
And so we built this for people who are influencing at their work, for the leadership, for management, for your coworker, because if we are aware of these key functional areas of our life and how we're doing, we can stay above water. We feel like we are able to keep pace in a world that's going really, really fast. So we're just going to jump in because there's 8 of them. And I want to talk about the wheel. And so...
Can I ask a question? Why did you decide to put it in a wheel?
The wheel came because I feel there's so many analogies with this. I think one is we feel like we're like the hamster on a wheel of life that just keeps going. And Healthy Hurried Human is about the fact that we're trying to keep pace in a very fast world. And if we're doing a good job in life, the wheels run smoothly. But if a wheel has a puncture, it doesn't run well. Or if it's flat on one side, our life isn't going to move forward in the way that we want to. So I think the wheel came from kind of thinking we want to not balance, because we've talked about this. We aren't going to be able to sustain a balance in life. That's kind of a mystery for us. We can't, the balance in life is not sustainable. But we can keep track of a wheel. When we are taking stock of these 8 areas in our life, we're not going to be doing perfection in all of them. But if we have a system in which to, what's the word I like to use? Appraise. I like the word appraise more than assess. If we're just able to appraise each of these areas in our life, it's not because, hey, these 2 areas in the wheel aren't doing great. Sometimes it's okay for those areas not to be the main focus of our life. But if we're appraising, we're still able to sustain a healthy living, a healthy quality of life. But we are aware of what's missing, or we're aware of what's lagging. So one of the areas in the wheel is feeling like we don't have a strong purpose.
This is huge.
Not having clarity in our role as an employee. Sometimes people go to work and they have no idea what really is their role? What value do they bring to the table? Maybe it's because there's been a structural shift. Projects that they're on, they're being mismanaged. There's new initiatives. That's one of my favorite ones. There's always a new initiative in your organizations. And those new initiatives tend to change practices the way, hey, we've always done it this way, but this new initiative is causing us to think about so that creates this misalignment for employees of, I'm not really sure what my role is now if you've completely changed how we used to do the same practices. Here's one: software updates.
Oh, huge.
Right?
That's the biggest misalignment, because people struggle to figure out, how do I do the job I've just always done? It has to be done a different way. You're asking someone to learn a new pattern or habit, or maybe it has reporting changes.
And this is us aligning the wheel and laying kind of this overlay of the employee or the workplace. So I want us to know the context in which we're talking about the wheel. Another one that we can think about is personal relationships. If an employee or a manager or a CEO is coming to work with multiple conflicts on various fronts in their personal relationships, whether it's taking care of their aging parents, maybe you have difficult teenagers or at home, maybe you have a college student that just can't quite find their footing and they're dealing with their mental health. It could be conflicts in the workplace, or you feel like you're the person that people tend to look to fix things, and you don't have the resources, or you don't have the ability to be the fixer. That can be very weighing on us, and we take that to work with us in that role.
Also, with roles, sometimes you have a role, but you don't have authority.
That's right.
And that's a extremely frustrating thing to be. You see something that needs to be fixed. It's your purview. It's what you're supposed to be over and managing, and you have to run it up the food chain or the org chart every time you try to make any forward motion with it, and it slows the process down, and it's really frustrating.
It is very frustrating. And when I think of thriving relationally, which is another spoke on the wheel, is when we hear this a lot from people in the age realm from about 28 to 47, that they struggle with creating friendships. And they try to do it at work. And there's work friends, and then there's outside of work, I don't really have thriving friendships. So then they try to replace it with, and so then conflict and things. How do you deal with that? So relationally thriving is a big, I've had a CEO ask me, why do I need to care about people's relationally thriving at work? Well, this is why. Because if people aren't understanding the tools and the resources that they have, and how do you build and make friends in middle age outside of work, they're trying to do it in work, and things get really messy if they're not doing that in a healthy way too. So that's one of the good reasons, important reasons, that if you're in leadership, you got to care about that for your employees. So another challenge that I see is that you can't remember the last time you enjoyed a life enrichment, like a good book or time doing your favorite hobby, or you've created an unhealthy habit of needing 2 hours alone in order just to unwind.
Is that another spoke on the wheel?
That is. And that's the one that you love so much, called daily self-parenting. I think it's important to talk about, we're not going to dive deep into all of these today because we obviously don't have time, but going forward, we're going to be touching on all of these and really probably make a podcast out of each of these, maybe 1 or 2 podcasts, who knows? But daily self-parenting is different than self-care. I heard a podcaster this week bring this question up. He goes, I wonder why we feel like it's so important to have, a week of vacation a couple times a year. And he's like, what about the week of, and he actually used my word. I call it my word. He's like, we need a week of self-parenting. We need a week to make our doctor's appointments and to actually call the roofer and to meet with the roofer and to take care of all of our life things. We need a week to do that, not to disengage from our life, but to actually engage in the things that help make our life better and give us better quality and taking care. So daily self-parenting to me is the things that we wish we still had, that we had growing up, where it was somebody telling us, hey, turn the TV off, put the book away, go to sleep. You definitely need to make sure you're flossing your teeth every single day. I can't believe I did not know adulthood was actually going to be a negotiation with myself on, do I actually want to floss today?
So far we've talked about 3: purpose-driven, relationally thriving, daily self-parenting.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 that you've mentioned. Do you want to touch on the other 5 while in this one, or do you want to?
Yeah. So
Okay.
just listing all of them on the wheel, like you said, purpose-driven, relationally thriving, positive self-growth, healthy inner circle, daily self-parenting, being emotionally grounded, empowering questions, learning to use empowering questions, and then how are we impacting others? What does our life look when we think about centering our life in order to help others succeed and to move forward? Those are the 8 key functioning indicators that tell us whether we are doing well in our life and living life in a healthy way, even though we're still hurried.
Yeah, that impacting other one, that kind of sounds like it's on an island by itself. But when I first started working the wheel, when I was working with you a year ago, I realized that purpose-driven, which really has 2 components to it,
That's right.
ties really directly into impacting others.
It does.
And so one of the things that's fascinating about this is that these, while independent spokes, also sometimes can directly correlate with another one of these indicators, because what I'm driven to do, my purpose, my overall purpose in the world, is going to affect how I show up in volunteering. And it's also going to impact how I show up relationally with people.
That's right.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how these interact with each other?
Well, and that was another, you'd asked me earlier about why the wheel, and it's because they're all connected. There's this connection between them that sometimes when we are just appraising and saying, hey, look, because of the season of life I am in, I can't give a lot of time to volunteering. But if I'm aware of that and know that that's a real heartbeat for me, I know that at some point in my life, I need to be moving in a forward direction so that I can make that a priority again. Understanding that they are all connected, but they aren't all going to be thriving at the same time. That's really important to understand.
All right. So could you unpack that a little bit about, so they're not all thriving
At the same time.
Okay. So how do we know if we're being healthy in the midst of it? What are the other ones? What does it look like if it's in a dormant? Does it go to a dormant state, or?
I think it depends. That's a individual question. And you and I created a,
Visual aid.
we created the visual aid, but we created the, appraisal test.
That's right.
We created the appraisal test where people can ask themselves very specific questions about how they're doing and sort of rate where they are in each of these key functional indicators. And it's not dormant. It's what I just said, which is going back to being able to acknowledge, maybe you're a new mom and you've got a baby, but you love service, you love volunteering, but you've got small ones at home, and there's just not a lot of time in the day to do a lot of extra service when you're in the job of trying to just keep little humans alive. And so, but if you aren't able to acknowledge that and you feel this void, you're going around feeling this void, or you're feeling guilty because people ask for, you're in places where they're like, I need a volunteer, and you want to, and then you feel guilty because you don't. But if you have a good, healthy way of kind of doing this appraisal to say, that is very important to me. I can't do that right now, but I know that I can. I'm going to leave space for that. Or maybe it brings you to a place of saying, well, here's what I can do in this place. It's not what I love. It's not how much I love to do it, but I can do it this much, this tiny little bit. But if we don't do the appraisal, we don't ever know. And so we fight the feelings of guilt and shame and judgment and void. I feel void.
We feel like we're not keeping pace. We're
That's
falling
right.
behind.
That's right.
When
Or we feel like this big lack of balance, which it's not about balance.
That's another reason why it's a circle, is because it is supposed to, there's not a real balance in a circle. It's just a motion, staying in motion.
That's right.
I am very excited about us getting to expand and talk about a couple of these. But the interesting thing to me when you and I first started working together was that you had created this as a tool for the people who are coming to you in a counseling role or a coaching role, to be able to have something they could go home and practice and use. And we started putting it into workplace language as a way to. Now, this is not a tool that a manager is supposed to put onto their employees.
That's right. Yep. Can't stress that enough.
So how do we use this in the workplace?
So I encourage leaders of people to, because I don't want to get caught up in titles, because you may not have the title of manager, but you're often the person that is tasked with organizing people. Or for you, like in your last job, you were tasked with bringing a certain element to the whole office, but they didn't quite give you, the nice big shiny title for it. So when you are a leader or an influencer of people, I think it's incredibly important for you to be looking at yourself, knowing where I know you hate this analogy, but it's that going back to the airplane thing, where if the oxygen mask drops down, put it on yourself first before you try to help others. Because when we are influencers or leaders of people, or we're in those roles, our natural instinct is to help and to fix and to give advice and to do these things. But if you aren't doing, or if you aren't in a place where you have a good sense of self, then you aren't going to do a great job. You'll have some winners every once in a while, because we all do, but you're not going to be able to consistently help others. So if we are able to practice it for ourselves regularly, we then become where we are able to identify it in others, a lacking in others. So here's my example of it. When we wake up in the morning, we know whether we've had enough sleep. We know whether we've been eating well. We know whether we've gotten enough exercise, sunshine. We know those things. It's typically sort of between the conscious and unconscious when we wake up and go through the day. But when somebody comes to us, for me as a mom, my kids come to me and they say, I've got a headache, and I know they've been at school all day. The first thing I ask them is, did you take your water bottle today? Were you drinking water? Because most of the time it's because they're probably a bit dehydrated. So we go to that place, but that's because I've lived an entire life of my parents, teachers, your doctor, other people asking you the things about kind of assessing how you're doing. We know the basic things. We know we need exercise, we need sunshine, we need proper nutrition, we need water, we need sleep. Those are some of the basic things. My goal in doing this is to give everybody a catalyst to be able to look at themselves and say, how am I doing? Emotionally, mentally, relationally. Because you hear me say this all the time. Those three things impact everything else. Emotionally, mentally, relationally. And so if you have this kind of unconscious, conscious way of kind of assimilating, appraising yourself, and you do it and you practice it, when somebody comes to you that you have influence over, or that you lead, or that you're in relationship with, and they make a complaint or they say something's really off, you're able to go to this place of saying, hey, is it the fact that maybe you're spending a lot of time caring for your aging parents and you haven't been able to take care of yourself?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about in the last year that you and I have worked together. Forbes, Harvard Business Review,
That's right.
like all of these top magazines are putting out that the way that employee engagement is failing is that the C-suite is not seeing people as whole individuals who have a full life outside of the office. And that is such a mind shift from the 1960s, 1970s of people coming to work. It's such a different mind shift of seeing your employees as whole people. And I think that some of it is because the leadership themselves don't own these 8 things for themselves.
Yes, and you're on. Michelle's going to get on her soapbox here because you've heard me talk about this. That we literally see the studies of where did employees EAPs, employee assistance programs, start. Mm-hmm. Where did they get birthed? Mm-hmm. Now, I might not be completely right on the dates here, but we saw them become very popular in the early 90s. One of the reasons we saw that is because of CEOs and your executive people started having, I'm sorry, not EAPs, but your workout exercise rooms at your companies.
Okay.
And before the 1990s, I remember my parents saying, there was never a gym at my workplace. Sure. But in the 90s, you started seeing companies, when they tried to attract employees, they would say, we have a workout room. I remember going and touring places that I was going to work, and they would make sure every time to show me their workout room. Half the time it was the broom closet that they cleaned out and threw in a couple of things. But the reason that happened is because you had in the late 80s and early 90s, I mean, it was in the newspapers quite often that CEOs, heads, executives of big companies and corporations were, having heart attacks, were keeling over with strokes, all of these different health issues.
Behaviors.
So all of a sudden it's like, let's throw everything at this, and we're going to create, it became important to them, and it's the trickle down effect. Well, then the employees need to have it. And then there became, benefits to having it, and with their health insurance and that kind of stuff. So it became very posh to have a workout room and to have, we'll pay the employees to do that. But you are exactly right that when it becomes important to the people who are leading, it will trickle down, and it will become important to every single person who comes into your organization.
It is, my revelation was that when we talk about this, and the fact that we no longer can escape, or we can no longer, I can't remember the word. Okay. We can no longer, not subdivide, but like whatever the word is. We cannot leave our work behind. Like even today, while you and I are trying to record the earlier podcast, your phone was blowing up because your kids are at home today, and they're texting and texting and texting. Like, we can't just go into a boardroom. We've got computers on our wrists, or some people have them in their glasses, that tingle, that buzz, that break your concentration and draw you out of where you are.
That's right.
To remind you that there's a bigger world out there that needs you. And it is, we never really get a chance to just turn that off, shut that down, and focus on our jobs, because our emails will ping us, our phones will vibrate, and we've got this chopped up life. And so it's no longer able to have these long streams of consciousness or quietness. And we're seeing the effects in the workplace.
The focus. And what's, you and I spend a lot of time talking about this, because this is what we do at Foxygen when we go into organizations, is we have to help leaders understand that when your employee comes in, they are not just your employee, which is the old mindset. That is the old mindset of working. You belong to the company. You belong to us. I
own you for these 8 hours.
When you run your badge, you check everything else out the door. it is, even if we wanted to say that and live by that, it's impossible unless you're going to have your workplace off grid, because your employees and your leadership, they can't do it. No one in the workplace is able to do that unless they're going off grid. Now, we can turn these things off. We can silence them for times, at certain times. But realistically, how long can we do that for? We've all been in meetings where they're like, everybody silence their phones. You may silence your phone, but your phone or your watch or something still it lights up. It buzzes. It still has a way of seeping in through the cracks.
Yeah, it's you talked about employee assistance programs, and one of the stressors that we were really dealing with is the fact that the baby boomers are at that age. They're in the 70s and 80 in the 70s of age, and their children, who are largely in the workforce, are dealing with nursing homes, elder care. It has become a huge focus for these employee assistance programs. And one of the ones I'm really excited, one of the KFIs I'm excited for us to talk about is purpose-driven and roles. And when your personal life is asking for you to take on a role that you've never done before, that is emotionally attached, and that is kind of overwhelming, that is where a lot of these EAP programs can offer elder care assistance. And sometimes employees don't know that.
That's right.
Because they were realizing this was such a burden.
That's
and
right.
it meant that when people were showing up to work, they had already sometimes had to deal with this in the morning or have these things they had to, we have daycare in there, and we have different aspects that have already been in our FSA and our different programs that we offer in companies to help ease that burden. But this is a new one.
It is so good for the workplace organization to adopt this, to lean into what we are talking about.
And acknowledge it.
To acknowledge it, but to also give space for it and to encourage it. Because when you are making sure, when you are providing resources, more than just your EAP, to your employees for them to become a healthier version of themselves, mentally, emotionally, relationally, you're getting a better employee. I mean,
That's right.
All the ones, Harvard Review, Forbes, all the ones that we read. I mean, it's not just our philosophy and our ideas. The science and the statistics are supporting this. It makes good working sense. It makes good money sense to invest in employees in this way, where we're looking at them as a whole-minded person. You and I talk about them being a whole-minded employee, which is looking at every facet of their being and saying, we're here to give you resources. We're here to support that. We're here to make that better.
And we also coach these leaders. It's not your role to fix that employee's problem.
That's right.
And knowing what your role is. But it's more than just the role. It's the reassurance that your company's not going to fire you. Your company's going to give you the support that you need, if possible. The company's going to understand, and not all that you have to share all your personal problems with the company, but just this is a very important aspect to working with the KFIs, is helping people see each other as whole beings as well as yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think this is probably a good place to this is a good teaser to
Yep, this is where we're gonna wrap this up. But my challenge for our listeners today would be, of the ones that we listed 8, is there one that kind of pricked you? Or maybe there was 2. I would encourage you to write it down and maybe write down some of your thoughts. Why did it prick you? But more importantly, if you'd like, you can go to our page and we have the wheel where you can actually see it. There's a visual aid for our listeners, and you can actually see that you can print it off and get the wheel. And eventually we're going to be able to get that appraisal that we've created for them,
yeah.
and they'll be able to take it as we dive in more in depth in each of these. So go get that printout and download of our wheel.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. This is a tool that really has impacted my life, and I'm really excited that we get to offer it to a larger community.
The Healthy Hurried Human Podcast is presented by Foxygen Consulting. At Foxygen, we provide business and performance psychology and consulting. We believe healthier people make a healthier workplace. Foxygen Consulting, breathing new life into your organization.